Okay, so now we're going to solve some quadratic equations that do not have real solutions. So in 3.1, when we solved using square roots or factoring or graphing, we looked for, what x is when y is 0, okay, where it crosses the x-axis. If it doesn't cross the x-axis, we said no real solutions. Well, there's still solutions. That video at the beginning of this module showed you that there actually is a solution. So now, after 3.1, you can no longer say no real solutions. We're going to find the answer. So let's solve number 11 here. And hint, hint, because it's in our complex number section, we're going to get a complex answer. All right. Or at least an imaginary answer. Okay. So if I want to solve for x, I need to first get it x squared by itself. Okay. So I'm going to subtract 121 to both sides. So x squared is going to equal negative 121. I must square root both sides. Now, when you square root both sides, it gives the, I don't know why I wrote x squared again. If I were to square root both sides, it is actually the positive and negative of the side that doesn't have the x squared, okay? Because remember, if no matter what x is, if x was 3 and I square it, I'm going to get 9. Well, if x is negative 3 and I square it, I'm still going to get 9, all right? So no matter what x is, it's positive or negative, you get that answer. So we have to, let me just go back. Okay, so when I write this and square root of x squared is x, I have to put that plus and minus square root of negative 121. Okay, square root both sides. That's what I just did. But do not forget that plus and minus. That means I have two answers. I have x as a positive, equals a positive square root of negative 21, and x equals a negative square root of 121. Okay, so let's simplify our radical here a little bit. So I'm still going to have a positive and negative. Well, I know I'm going to have an I because I have the negative out front. And then square root of 121 is actually 11. I can take a square root of 121 and get a real number. So I'm just going to put the 11 in front of I. Remember, that number goes in front of I. If you have a radical or square root, it goes after the I, okay? But all things that were in that square root are simplifying has to come after the plus and minus. So here, pushing all kinds of things. X equals the plus and minus 11i. So in Big Ideas, it might have it as this. That's a true answer. It also might have it as x equals negative 11i and a positive 11i. Okay, those are both two true statements. Every time you have an imaginary solution to a quadratic, you have another imaginary solution. You always have two, and this is why when we square root both sides, we get a plus and a minus. So, number 12. Let's see, we have x squared. We don't have an x, so that's fine. Let's move that 25 to the right. Let's get x. We want to get x squared all by itself. So I have 3x squared. It's going to equal a negative 100 and, I'm just joking, not 100, 441. Now we have to get x squared by itself by dividing by 3. So I do get x squared by itself, and I get that equals negative 147. Okay, when we square root both sides, the squared goes away, and I get plus or minus the square root of a negative 147. And we need to simplify that. So I have my answer. I know it's going to have the plus or minus. I know somewhere in there's an I, kind of leaving room before and after it. Well, but let's look at square root 147 and see how we can simplify it. We need the biggest perfect square that goes into 147. So I usually start higher and I start dividing by those perfect squares. And let's see, I know 81's not going to go into it. Remember, 81's 9 squared, so that's a perfect square. 64 is 8 squared, so 147, I can't divide by 64 and get a nice pretty whole number. So let's see, 147 divided by 49, which is 7 squared, does. So the same thing as saying 49 times 3 gives me 147. And I can take the square root of 49 and get 7. So I'm going to have a 7 and a square root of 3. The 7, the whole number, is going in front of I. The square root is going after I. Okay, so this is a perfectly fine answer, plus or minus 7I square root of 3. Or you could say, okay, so I have 7I square root of 3 and a negative 7I square root of 3. Or switch those and say negative first and then positive. That part doesn't matter. All right, so now go to your practice. I did not write it down. I thought I had. Go to your practice and do problems 49, 52, and 54. And then move on to the last video.